missing for more than 4 hours. They found me shivering on the ground in front of the Hobson place, unresponsive and crying. They told me that by the time I was brought to the hospital, I was completely unconscious and unconscious. They told me that by the time they told me that They told me that by the time I was brought to the hospital, I was completely unconscious and just wouldn't wake up. They said that I had remained unconscious for a week. They said that I had remained unconscious for a week. They wanted to know what happened. And when I told them, they started to talk about other things. Things like PTSD and hallucinations and psychosis and trauma. They didn't even pretend to believe me, but I knew what I saw. Nobody could convince me otherwise. Even when the police came and told me they'd been through the house and found nothing, I knew the truth. I was rewarded with a brief stint in a mental ward for my stubbornness. Eventually, I learned to lie and to play the game. I pretended to be normal and healthy, and it fooled everyone. Even me. I pretended to be normal and healthy, and it fooled everyone. Even me.
What was that?
I pretended to be normal and healthy, and it fooled everyone. Even me. They let me out after a few months, and I went back to life as usual. I moved away to college, and I let them believe I'd left the Hobson house in the past. They were fools, falling for that ruse. As soon as I was away from Beverly Valley, I did a little research. I needed answers, and I wasn't getting them from anyone in my hometown, especially not from those people who knew about my incident. Google, however, proved to be very informative. Do you know what I learned?
What'd you learn?
I learned the sordid details about what happened to the Hobsons. About how Mr. Hobson was skinned alive, blinded and burned to death.
Bros.
About how Mrs. Hobson was eviscerated, bound with barbed wire and split open at the mouth with a pair of old scissors.
Also gross.
They believe she died last, lying next to her husband as his body burned to near ash.
Bros.
But that's not all.
But wait, there's more.
I did a little research on Pigfucker too,
Yeah.
and his friends, at least those whose names I remembered or could find.
Oh.
Dead. Names I remembered or could find. Dead. Every single one. find. Dead. Every single one. They had all died within a few months after the murders. Big fucker had been knifed to death by another inmate. A few of the others had committed suicide out of guilt. One had a heart attack and was found dead in his cot the next morning. And I? Well, I know the truth. I don't talk about the Hobson house anymore. This is the only account that will ever exist of my experiences. Just like everyone else in Beverly Valley, I pretend that it doesn't exist.
Oh, what is this? Aggressively clearing throats. Alright.
Doesn't exist. I try to forget Halloween's past. I shut away all the memories and nightmares as best I can.
Drinking my water. Is that what this is? Gross.
Nightmares as best I can. I try to forget Halloween's past.
What?
I try to forget Halloween's past.
Oh.
I try to forget Halloween's past. I shut away all the memories and nightmares as best as I can. But sometimes, when it's late at night and sleep is evading me,
Shit.
when it's late at night and sleep is evading me,
You hear that?
and sleep, and sleep, and sleep, and sleep, 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 sleep.
You hear that crap? No, no.
Sleep, 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 sleep. But but when it's but sometimes when it's late at night and sleep when it's late at night and sleep
Wait.
when it's late at night and sleep
Gross.
but sometime when it's but sometimes when it's late at night and sleep is evading me, sleep
Where is it?
sleep 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 and sleep and sleep and sleep when it's late at night and sleep is evading me.
That's fine.
I think back to that awful sight of Mr. Hobson and Mrs. Hobson torturing their murderers, feasting on their flesh. Terrible caricatures of themselves, damned to eternity and damning in return. And I can't help but agree with what Mr. Hobson said. It seems that they did get them in the end.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-bum. Oh, I can get back on Twitter. Cool.
Every child in Beverly Valley knew that Mr. and Mrs. Hobson down on Maplewood Drive gave out the best candy. It wasn't even just candy. That was the best part. They gave out sticky pink popcorn balls and caramel apples, and one year they even gave out toy whistles. That sure pissed off all our parents for a good few weeks. Each year, children flocked to their house, eager to be the first to knock on that door and show off their costumes. The Hobsons had a serious appreciation for costumes. On that night, they could make every child feel like they'd actually become whatever it was they sought to impersonate. From dinosaurs to dragons to princesses to witches. Yes, Halloween in Beverly Valley was the most important night of the year. At least to us children it was. I like to think that the Hobsons felt the same. I suppose I'll never know for certain, though. They passed away when I was 12. Well, passed away is probably not the most accurate choice of words, though it is the most merciful. You see, one Halloween, a few neighborhood teenagers decided to break into the Hobsons' home after all the trick-or-treating had ended. They were real delinquents. I remember one of them. His name was Matthew Torres, but everyone called him Pigfucker because, I don't know, I guess he looked like he liked to fuck pigs. Anyway, Pigfucker and his gang broke into the house. The Hobsons, of course, were already asleep, not that it mattered to them. I didn't know all the details of what those boys did, but when morning came, it was horrifying. The crime scene photos were never made public. All most people know is that the torture had gone on for hours, and they had done unspeakable things to the both of them. It wasn't long before they were caught, of course, and sentenced to life in prison. But that hardly seemed like justice for what they'd done to perhaps the two nicest people in all of Beverly Valley. No justice could mend what had been broken in our little town that night. For a few years after that, Halloween just didn't happen in our neighborhood. It was too dangerous, everyone said. But that was a lie, a cover-up. The truth was, we all felt that Halloween had died that night with the Hobsons. But time moves on quickly, and people move on. Eventually, kids started trick-or-treating again. Only a few at first, but as the years passed by, the holiday festivities came back in full force, and we all tried to pretend that the Hobsons had never existed. I was doing a pretty good job of it, too, until the year I turned 18 and my mom asked me to bring my little cousin Danny out trick-or-treating. That's a night I don't think I'll ever forget. My Aunt Priscilla was finishing adjusting Danny's hat, having used about 100 bobby pins to keep it in place. She made a perfect little witch, with her broomstick and stuffed black cat. She was wearing an orange skirt with black spiderwebs stitched over it, and a lacy top with long draping black sleeves. She had been practicing her witch's cackle all week. It was incredibly adorable. So much so that I didn't even mind that I'd be sacrificing a night to take her out trick-or-treating. Besides, even at 8 years old, Danny was incredibly well behaved and a joy to be around. She and I always had a good time together. Are you ready to go, your terribleness? I held out my hand. She accepted it and answered with that cackle she was so proud of. I grinned. I'll take that as a yes. Come on, we'd better get a move on or the best candy will be gone. I felt a small twinge at that, remembering what the word best used to mean to me on Halloween. But I pushed it away as we walked out the door together. See you later, Aunt Priscilla. And with that, we were off. I could bore you with the details of what a great night we had together. All the houses we visited, the praise that Danny got for being the best little witch anyone had ever seen. I could dwell on that moment that Danny told me it had been her best Halloween ever, knowing that I was the one who had made that happen. But you aren't here for a happy story, are you? Of course not. Given the choice, humans would rather watch a train wreck than a sunrise. Well, here comes the train. It was getting to be around 9:30 when I decided it was time to start heading back home. We were in familiar territory, and it wouldn't take long to get back, but I figured we'd have a few more stops along the way, so it was better safe than sorry. This was back before I had a cell phone, and I didn't want Aunt Priscilla to worry. Just as we were leaving the Johnson house, a group of guys pulled up in a beat-up old Chevy. I recognized them as some friends from school. That was when I made a mistake. I shifted my attention, just for a minute, to answer my friends and give my 2 cents on where Willem might have dragged his drunk ass this time. After all, Danny was always so good. I figured she would stay by me and wait until I was done talking to my buddies. I was wrong. Once the guys had driven off, I glanced down to my right and realized that Danny wasn't there like she was supposed to be. I looked around the yard, my alarm growing at a steady rate as I realized I had lost track of her. Oh God. My heart began to constrict in my chest and my throat closed up. Fuck. Okay, calm down. We're in our own neighborhood. We're close to home. She can't be far. And that's when I saw something. Just a glimmer of orange down the street. The same shade as Danny's skirt. I thought it would bring me relief. But it didn't. Would you like to know why? Because I recognized that street she was walking down. Maplewood Drive. And I recognized that house she was walking towards. The Hobson place. Danny, no! Get away from there! It was like she didn't even hear me. I started sprinting for her just as she reached the front porch steps. I told myself I was scared because the house attracted weirdos, and who knows what they would do if they got their hands on a little girl. I told myself I was running because the wood was rotted and she could fall and hurt herself if I didn't stop her. I told myself a lot of things as I watched her walk to the front step and ring the doorbell. They were all lies. In reality, I was afraid of something else. I just didn't know quite what it was yet. As Danny stood there in front of the door, waiting for someone who would never come, my heartbeat slowed down infinitesimally. Everything would be okay. I'd get up those stairs and grab her and take her home, and everything would be just fine, as always. Except, that's not what happened. You see, just as I reached the edge of the yard, the door opened. I stumbled to a halt, half paralyzed with both fear and confusion. Nobody lived in that place anymore. Nobody would dare. And as I stood there, about as useful as a goddamn stump, a hand reached out. It was withered, its leathery skin blackened with age and something else. Burn marks, maybe? It was dark, and I couldn't see clearly enough to say for certain. As I wasted my time staring at it, the dark hand crooked a finger. It was beckoning Danny inside. Jesus Christ, Danny, no! She didn't even flinch. She stepped over the threshold, and the door creaked closed behind her. I followed behind just a little too late. Always a little too late. Even in my nightmares. Or are they memories? It makes no difference to me. As gently as the door had opened before, it slammed against the wall in an equal show of violence as I barged my way into the house. Danny! Danny, where are you? I tried not to notice the house and how much it had changed since the last time I'd seen it. The interior of the house, what I could see from the door each year anyway, was once warm, bright, and meticulously clean. It was a far cry from the destitute, rotting wood and sagging floorboards that surrounded me as I searched for my cousin. It was like a strange sort of parody of the Hobson house, and it so disgusted me that I thought for one brief moment I was going to throw up all over the floor. But there wasn't time for that. Danny was inside with something, and I had to find her. Swallowing my gorge down, I rushed through the hallways, trying to find a clue, any clue, as to where she might have gone. It came to me in the form of an open door and a tinkling laugh. It belonged to Danny, without a doubt. As I approached the door, I was dismayed to realize that it led to a basement. A cold, stark light cut through the darkness, emanating from somewhere deep inside the bowels of the house, taunting me even as it called to me. Taking a deep breath and ignoring the stale taste of the air, I began my descent into that strange light. It seemed like a century later when I finally reached the bottom of the stairs. Each step down was a war against my own instincts that screamed at me to run. I had to remind myself continually of the little girl I was surely going to save, of my responsibility to her and my aunt and my whole family. It was painful, and it was slow, but I made progress. At last I reached the landing and stepped out into the basement proper. I didn't see Danny right away. Remember what I said about train wrecks and sunrises? Don't think I was trying to exclude myself from that precious facet of human nature. Of course, the first thing I saw wasn't what I'd been looking for, what I wanted to see. Instead, I saw carnage. There were bodies scattered all over the floor, torn apart into so many pieces that it was impossible to discern what belonged to whom. There was no way the victims could still be alive, and yet their wailing screams filled the air. It was a wonder that I hadn't heard it, really, as I walked down into the basement. If I had, I might have taken the coward's way out and run for my life. Among the quivering masses of flesh that begged for mercy and for death, moved two strange figures. The first was tall, with a frame so thin it looked as though it would collapse in on itself. I recognized the hand attached to it, the one that had beckoned Danny into the house. Its whole skin was charred black. It swayed in the middle of the floor, casting its eyes about as though looking for something. Those eyes were completely white, milky even, as though covered with cataracts. Eventually, it found what it was looking for. A juicy piece of meat still attached to what must have been a leg bone. It bent down slowly, its joints creaking and its body swaying under the strain, and pulled the meat from the bone with its long hooked fingers. Someone screamed in terrible pain as it lifted the flesh to its mouth, sucking the blood and chewing slowly, almost thoughtfully. It was a long few moments before I tore my attention away and took stock of its companion. This figure was shorter, its flesh only slightly burned. What wasn't burned was rotted, hanging loose to give me a peek at its slimy bones. Barbed wire was wrapped around its body, which, horrifying as it was, seemed to be holding its flesh together. Its abdomen was cut open, and its intestines trailed out, leaving an oozing trail of blood in its wake. It, too, was searching for flesh, trying to find something to appease its hunger. Its maw opened wide in a pair.
Alright, that's probably good. Okay. Well, I am done editing, so time to leave. Time to go. Thank you for joining. Have a good day. And stay frosty. I don't know, I like saying that, but you better stay frosty or I'll yeah.